The dinner table was quiet except for the sound of spoons clinking against plates. The smell of stew filled the air, but Amelia barely tasted the food. She was used to silence at dinner, used to being invisible in her own house. Her parents always had more to say to Michael, her older brother, the golden child, the one who never seemed to do wrong. That night, though, something felt different. Her mother's eyes kept flicking toward her, and her father's jaw was tight, as if he had been holding something in all day. Amelia lowered her head, pretending to focus on the rice in front of her, when her father suddenly put down his spoon. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words came out heavy, sharp enough to cut through the silence. Life would be better without you. For a second, Amelia thought she misheard him. Her heart stopped, then raced. She looked up slowly, searching their faces for any sign that this was some cruel joke. But there was none. Her mother didn't even flinch. She just nodded, as if her father had spoken a simple truth, something they both agreed on long ago. The room froze. Even Michael shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't say a word. Amelia felt her throat tighten, her hands shaking under the table. She wanted to speak, to ask why, but the words stuck in her chest. Her parents carried on eating as if nothing had been said. Her father sipped water. Her mother reached for the salt. Amelia sat there, her food untouched, her vision blurring as tears fought to spill. It was as though the ground beneath her had vanished, and she was falling into a hole she couldn't climb out of. She wondered if Michael would defend her, if he would break the silence that pressed so hard on her chest. But he kept his eyes on his plate, his fork moving slowly, pretending not to hear. That silence hurt almost as much as the words themselves. Amelia tried to swallow, but her throat burned. The stew tasted bitter now, like ashes. She wanted to run, to scream, to disappear from the table, but her body stayed frozen, as if trapped between shame and disbelief. Her parents didn't look at her again. They didn't explain. They didn't soften the blow. It was as if she was not their daughter at all, but an unwanted guest who had overstayed her welcome. Inside her mind, one question kept echoing louder than Amelia was 24 years old, but some days she felt much older. Her shoulders carried the weight of years of being the one nobody wanted, the one who never seemed good enough. She was the kind of child who worked hard in school, who stayed up late finishing her assignments, who tried to please everyone in the house. But no matter what she did, her parents never seemed to notice. Growing up, the comparison between her and Michael was constant. Michael was 2 years older, taller, louder, and always the star of the family. If he brought home a B on his report card, their parents clapped and said he was brilliant. If Amelia brought home an A, the response was, "You should try harder." If Michael forgot to do a chore, it was excused with a laugh. If Amelia forgot, it turned into a lecture about how careless and lazy she was. Michael could do no wrong, and Amelia could do no right. It wasn't as though she hated her brother. In fact, when they were younger, she used to look up to him, trailing behind him in the yard, begging to play. But Michael learned early that siding with their parents meant life was easier. Slowly, he began treating her the same way they did, rolling his eyes when she spoke, mocking her mistakes, reminding her she wasn't enough. By the time Amelia was a teenager, the message was clear. In this house, she was the scapegoat. Every problem found its way to her shoulders. If her parents argued, somehow she was blamed for adding stress to the family. If Michael got into trouble at school, they said Amelia was a bad influence. If money was tight, they said it was because of her needs, her schooling, her existence. She learned to walk quietly, to keep her head down, to stay out of the way. Silence became her shield. If she didn't speak, maybe she couldn't be blamed. If she didn't ask for anything, maybe they wouldn't see her at all. But inside, Amelia still wanted love. No matter how many times she was ignored or criticized, there was a part of her that hoped one day her parents would look at her the way they looked at Michael, proud, warm, approving. She longed for her mother to hold her, even just once, and tell her she was enough. She dreamed of her father clapping her on the back, saying he was proud of her. That small hope kept her going, even when the truth whispered that it would never happen. Life in the house as an adult wasn't much different from her childhood. The walls still carried the same coldness. Meals were eaten in silence or filled with conversations that left her out. Michael, though now working, still came home to a hero's welcome. He would talk about his job, his friends, his plans, and their parents would beam with pride. Amelia, meanwhile, could speak about her day and receive only blank stares, or worse, criticism about how unimportant her work was. She worked long hours at a small local office, doing clerical tasks that barely paid enough to cover her personal expenses. Every morning, she left before anyone else woke, and every evening, she returned to a house where she was invisible. She cleaned, she cooked, she contributed what little she could, but it was never acknowledged. The house itself felt like a cage. She had her own small room, but even there she felt unwelcome. The walls were thin, and she could hear her parents laughing with Michael while she sat alone. Sometimes she pressed her pillow to her face to stop herself from crying too loudly. To survive, Amelia had taught herself to blend into the background. She didn't bring friends home. She didn't share her dreams. She didn't argue, because arguments only ended with more pain. Instead, she tried to stay small, unnoticed. But no matter how much she tried to disappear, the pain stayed. Every word of criticism cut deeper, because it came from the people who were supposed to love her. Every comparison with Michael reminded her she was a disappointment in their eyes. And yet, despite everything, she couldn't stop wanting their approval. Amelia knew the house was toxic, but it was still her home. She didn't have anywhere else to go, and leaving felt impossible with her limited means. So she stayed, holding on to the faint hope that maybe one day things would change. Maybe one day they would finally see her, not as the problem, not as the burden, but as their... It was late at night when Amelia heard them. She had been lying awake in her room, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then she heard voices, her parents' voices, coming from the living room. They were speaking in low tones, but the words carried through the thin wall. At first, she thought it was another argument about money or Michael's future. She wasn't used to them talking about her at all, unless it was to criticize. But then she caught her name. She held her breath and pressed her ear closer to the wall. "I can't keep doing this," her father said, his voice heavy. "She's 24 and still here. Still draining us." Her mother sighed. "I told you from the beginning. We should have made different choices. She was never supposed to be here. We didn't plan for her. And now look at us." Amelia's chest tightened. She pushed herself off the bed, her bare feet landing softly on the floor. Slowly, she crept closer to the door, just enough to hear more clearly. "We need to think about Michael," her father continued. "His future matters. If she stays here, she'll drag him down too. Maybe it's time we sent her away." Her mother's voice dropped, almost cold. "It would be better for everyone. For us. For him. Even for her. Life would be easier without her in this house." Amelia's knees buckled, and she pressed her hand against the doorframe to keep from falling. She wanted to tell herself she was dreaming, that she was making it up in her head. But the words were sharp, too clear to ignore. Never supposed to be here. Send her away. Life would be easier without her. Tears filled her eyes as the truth settled over her like ice. It wasn't just that her parents didn't love her. It wasn't just that they preferred Michael. They had never wanted her at all. She was nothing more than a mistake, a burden they had carried for too long. Her mind raced back through the years, connecting all the dots, the harsh words, the constant criticism, the silence, the way Michael was always chosen over her. It all made sense now. She wasn't unlucky. She wasn't just unloved. She was unwanted from the very beginning. Her father's voice broke her thoughts. "We should tell her. Make it clear. Maybe then she'll finally leave on her own." Her mother agreed quietly. "Yes. The sooner, the better." Amelia stumbled back toward her bed, her hands shaking. She climbed under the blanket, curling into herself as though it could shield her from the words still ringing in her ear. Her body trembled, her pillow wet with tears. For hours she lay there, her heart breaking in silence. The betrayal cut so deep she could hardly breathe. It was one thing to feel unloved. It was another to know you were never wanted in the first place. A small voice inside her whispered that maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't belong. Maybe it would be easier for everyone if she disappeared, if she stopped trying, stopped hoping. The thought scared her, but it lingered heavy and tempting. Yet, another voice rose quietly against it. A voice she barely recognized, her own. "If they don't want me, then why am I still giving them the power to decide who I am?" She wiped her tears, though her hands shook. She wasn't strong yet, but the seed of something new had been planted that night. The choice stood before her clearly, to sink deeper into despair and let their words destroy her, or to fight, for herself, for her life, for a future beyond the walls of this house. Amelia didn't know what she would do yet. But as dawn crept through her window, she knew one thing for certain. Her parents had shown her the truth, and nothing would ever be the same again. The days after that night felt heavier than anything Amelia had ever known. It was as if her parents had decided that speaking the truth out loud gave them permission to be cruel without hiding it anymore. They didn't whisper about her behind closed doors now. They said things openly, sharp comments thrown like stones every time she walked into the room. "Why are you still here?" her father muttered one morning when she passed him in the hallway. "You're a burden, Amelia," her mother added at dinner, shaking her head. "One day, maybe you'll understand the damage you've caused this family." The words piled up, one after another, pressing down on her until she felt like she could hardly breathe. And yet, she forced herself to keep moving. She still cooked meals, still washed the dishes, still tried to act as though her chest wasn't aching with every cruel reminder that she was unwanted. Michael wasn't any better. If anything, he seemed to grow bolder now that their parents had made their feelings clear. One evening, When Amelia gathered the courage to tell him quietly that their words were breaking her, hoping at least her brother might show a little kindness, he only shrugged. "You should just leave then," he said casually, his voice dripping with the same coldness their parents used. "They're right, Amelia. Everyone would be better off." The betrayal stung like fire. She stared at him, her eyes searching for even a trace of the boy she had followed around as a child, the brother she once admired. But there was nothing there. He had chosen his side long ago. The house grew lonelier, even when filled with people. They laughed with Michael, shared meals with him, celebrated his smallest achievements while ignoring hers entirely. Amelia felt herself shrinking in the silence, her body moving but her spirit slipping further into the shadows. Still, outside the house, people began to notice. A neighbor, Mrs. Collins, stopped her once when she was coming home from work. "You look so tired, dear," the woman said gently. "Are you taking care of yourself?" Amelia forced a smile, insisting she was fine, but her cracked voice gave her away. At work, too, her co-workers whispered sometimes when they thought she couldn't hear. "She's so quiet," one of them said. "Something's wrong with that girl. You can see it in her eyes." Amelia pretended she didn't hear, keeping her head low, her papers in order, always on time, always dependable. The worst part was the constant voice inside her head, echoing her parents' words. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong anywhere. Maybe I really am the problem." She battled it every night, lying awake in her small bed, her thoughts heavy and sharp. But even in that storm, something inside her refused to die. It showed itself in small, quiet ways. One evening, after another dinner filled with insults, Amelia stepped outside into the cool night air. The stars stretched above her, distant but bright. For the first time in a long time, she let herself breathe deeply. She whispered to herself, almost too softly to hear, "I am still here." The words were shaky, but they gave her a strange kind of strength. Another time, when her parents criticized her cooking, mocking the stew she had spent hours making, Amelia swallowed her tears and decided not to take their words as truth. Instead, the next day she took a small container of leftovers to work. A coworker tasted it and smiled. "This is delicious, Amelia. You made this." The praise warmed her chest like sunlight breaking through dark clouds. She started keeping a small notebook hidden in her room. At night, when the house was quiet, she wrote down everything she couldn't say out loud. Her fears, her anger, her dreams of leaving. The pages filled slowly, but they reminded her that she still had a voice, even if no one in her family cared to hear it. But the cruelty at home only deepened. One weekend, her parents invited relatives over for dinner. Amelia worked all day cleaning, cooking, making sure everything was perfect. When the guests arrived, her mother introduced Michael proudly, bragging about his job, his future, his achievements. When it came to Amelia, her father laughed and said, "She's still trying to figure out what to do with her life. We've carried her long enough." Everyone chuckled politely, and Amelia's cheeks burned with shame. She forced a smile, retreating to the kitchen, her hands trembling as she washed dishes she hadn't even dirted. After the guests left, she found herself alone in the backyard, staring at the night sky again. Her chest ached, but she repeated the words softly, "I am still here." It became her quiet mantra, her way of fighting back against the darkness creeping in. One night, Michael crossed an even deeper line. He found her notebook. She had left it under her pillow, thinking it was safe, but somehow he discovered it. At dinner, he mocked her in front of their parents, reading out a line she had written. "One day, I will leave this house and never come back." Her parents laughed, shaking their heads. "As if she could survive out there," her mother sneered. "She can't even handle herself here." Amelia wanted to sink through the floor. But later, when she was alone in her room, she refused to let them steal the only piece of hope she had. She started a new notebook, hiding it better this time, and filled the first page with bold letters. "They will not break me." Each day became a battle. Some days she lost, crying herself to sleep, doubting her worth, believing their lie. But other days, she found sparks of strength, tiny flames that refused to go out. A kind word from a coworker, a smile from Mrs. Collins, a secret line in her notebook reminding her she was still alive. The cracks in the family were widening, and Amelia felt herself caught in the middle of them, bruised and battered by every harsh word, every betrayal. Yet, despite it all, something deep within her whispered that she was more than what they said, more than the scapegoat they tried to make her. For the first time, she began to wonder, not if she could survive without them, but if maybe, just maybe, she would be better off. The living room was crowded with voices and laughter. It was Michael's promotion party, and their parents had invited relatives, neighbors, and friends to celebrate. The table was covered with food, drinks, and decorations, all centered around him. Amelia had helped prepare everything, cleaning for days, cooking dishes, setting chairs, making sure the house looked perfect. But when the guests arrived, she felt invisible again, blending into the corners like she didn't belong. Her parents beamed with pride as Michael stood in the center of the room, retelling stories about his hard work and bright future. Their father clapped him on the back. Their mother held his arm like he was a trophy. "We always knew he would make us proud," their mother said loudly, smiling so everyone could hear. And then came the words that broke Amelia's last piece of silence. "What about your daughter?" A distant aunt asked politely, glancing toward Amelia, who sat quietly by the window. "How is she doing?" The room fell strangely quiet. Amelia felt dozens of eyes shift to her, waiting for her parents to speak. She hoped, just once, they would say something kind. Anything at all. Instead, her father let out a laugh, sharp and bitter. "Amelia? She's still around, still figuring herself out. Truth is, she was never supposed to be here in the first place." Her heart stopped. Her mother joined in, shaking her head as though it were a small inconvenience. "It's true. She was a mistake, an unplanned pregnancy. We weren't ready for her, and honestly, she only made our lives harder." The words hung in the air like poison. The guests shifted uncomfortably. Some coughed, others avoided Amelia's eyes. Michael smirked slightly, sipping his drink, not offering even the smallest defense. Amelia felt her body trembling. She couldn't stop it. Her hands shook so violently she had to press them against her knees. Her chest tightened until breathing became painful. She wanted to run out of the house, to disappear forever, but something inside her snapped instead. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. All eyes turned to her. Her parents looked annoyed, as if her very act of standing was an inconvenience. "You regret me?" Her voice cracked. Her father shrugged, not even ashamed. "Yes, Amelia. We do. You've been nothing but trouble. Everything was harder with you around. If we could change it, we would." Gasps filled the room. Some guests whispered, some shook their heads, but no one spoke loud enough to stop it. Amelia's tears streamed down, but this time she didn't hide them. She looked at Michael, hoping he might finally show her a sliver of kindness. Instead, he leaned back casually and said, "They're only telling the truth. You've always been the problem." Her breath caught in her throat. She realized then that he had never been on her side, not once, not ever. He had betrayed her again and again, mocking her pain, choosing their parents' approval over his sister's dignity. For the first time in her life, Amelia's sadness burned into anger. Her voice shook, but it grew louder with every word. "You've treated me like dirt my whole life. You compared me, blamed me, laughed at me. And still I stayed. Still, I tried to love you. Do you know what it's like to spend your whole life begging for scraps of love from your own family?" Her parents' faces stiffened, but she didn't stop. "You think I'm a mistake? Then fine. But let me tell you something. You will never break me. I am not your regret. I am not your shame. I am your daughter, whether you wanted me or not. And one day, when I walk out of this house, you'll realize you lost the only person who ever gave you loyalty without asking for anything back." The room was silent. Amelia's voice cracked, her tears falling freely, but she stood tall. Her parents glared, but their silence only showed their guilt. Michael shifted uncomfortably, his smirk fading when he realized people were staring at him now, judging his cruelty. One of the relatives finally spoke. "How could you say that to your child? What kind of parents talk like this?" The whispers grew louder, some nodding in agreement, others staring at Amelia with pity. Her parents tried to brush it off, but the damage was done. The truth was out, exposed in front of everyone. Amelia wiped her tears with the back of her hand and looked at her family one last time. "You wanted me gone? Don't worry. One day soon you'll get your wish. But it won't be because I'm broken. It will be because I finally choose myself." With that, she turned and walked out of the room, her legs shaking but her head held high. For the first time, she wasn't silent. For the first time, the next morning, Amelia woke up with swollen eyes and a pounding heart. The echoes of the night before still haunted her, the laughter, the whispers, the way her parents had called her a mistake in front of everyone. But beneath the pain was something new, something stronger. She was done waiting for their love. For the first time in her life, she packed a bag. Just a few clothes, her notebooks, and the little money she had saved from work. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't leave a note. She just walked out quietly, carrying her life in a single worn-out bag, her heart heavy but determined. The city was loud and overwhelming, but it was also freeing. For the first time, every step belonged to her. She rented a tiny room in a rundown building, barely big enough for a bed and a chair, but it was hers. No one shouted at her there. No one compared her to Michael. No one told her she was unwanted. At first, it was hard. She struggled with bills, skipped meals to save money, and worked extra hours at her office job. Some nights she cried, not because she wanted to go back, but because the silence reminded her how much she had lost, or maybe how much she had never truly had. But slowly, Amelia began to see herself differently. One evening, her coworker, Jenna, noticed her staying late again and offered her a ride home. On the way, Jenna asked gently, "Why do you always look so tired? You're too young to carry so much weight." Amelia hesitated, then, for the first time, told a piece of her story. She didn't share everything, but enough for Jenna to understand. Instead of pity, Jenna gave her kindness. "You deserve better than that," she said simply. Those words, so different from the ones she grew up with, felt like a gift. In time, Amelia found herself leaning on Jenna more, and others too. A kind supervisor at work praised her for her attention to detail. Mrs. Collins, the neighbor who once asked if she was all right, found her new address and brought her home-cooked meals sometime. These small acts of kindness built her slowly, like bricks forming a foundation she had never been given as a child. Amelia also found strength in her notebooks. She wrote more than ever, pouring her pain, her questions, her hopes into the pages. But now, her words were changing. Instead of lines filled with despair, she started writing about the life she wanted to build, the independence she was tasting, the freedom of no longer being silenced. There were still nights when doubt crept in. Nights when she wondered if she had made a mistake, if she would ever fully heal. But each morning she woke up and chose to keep going, and that choice itself was power. Months passed, and Amelia saved enough to enroll in evening classes. She wanted to learn more, to grow beyond the narrow box her family had shoved her into. Sitting in a classroom, surrounded by strangers who didn't know her past, she felt lighter. No one there looked at her with disappointment. No one whispered that she was a mistake. She was just Amelia, student, writer, young woman building a new life. One evening after class, she walked home under the streetlights, her books in hand, and realized she was smiling. It wasn't a big smile, just a small, quiet one. But it was real. She no longer needed her parents' approval to feel whole. She no longer needed Michael's shadow to define her worth. She was beginning to understand that her life was hers to shape. Her parents had told her that life would be better without her. And maybe they were right, but not in the way they meant. Life was better without their cruelty, without their constant rejection. Life was better now that she had chosen herself.